new poll drop that came out on Sunday, September 8th. So a new YouGov CBS News poll just dropped. YouGov is a B-rated pollster. We got a likely voter poll dated 9/6. It dropped on the 8th though. So we got a Rust Belt poll that came out. So it says new general election poll: Michigan Harris +1, Pennsylvania tie, Wisconsin Harris +2. So these are actually really solid numbers. So a lot of people are actually going to look at this and probably panic and think this is actually bad for Kamala Harris. I actually think that these numbers are actually really good for Kamala Harris. Now, why do I say that? Now, the margins here look smaller, right? So, for example, for Michigan, people are going to be like, man, it's a tight race. Kamala's contracting like she's, giving birth. She's having contractions. It's only up 1. We can look at this aggregate here. It's 1.9% in the aggregate here in 538's model. So it's like, man, it's a smaller aggregate number, a smaller number than aggregate. But the thing is, I think we need to understand things differently. So here's the thing. So we all know that in the Rust Belt, if you want to win, you want to be up by 3 to 5 points, right? That's the thing, because there's this large polling error that consistently underestimates Donald Trump, and so you need to be up by that many points. But here's the problem with that. So the polling error is actually a function of what Trump's poll numbers are. So for example, back in 2020, you can see in the state of Michigan, he's at 43.2% in the polls on election day. He's at 43.2%, and then Biden is at like 51 or something. He's 51 point something, right? I think like 51.2. So he's at 51.2, right? So he way overperforms. Donald Trump far overperforms in the state of Michigan, but you can see it's a very weak performance on his part. So Biden gets 50.6%, which is a slight underperformance about 0.5. Donald Trump actually gets 47.8, which is really, really weak. He can't even hit 48%. But he severely overperformed in the numbers, right? Because what we can see is his numbers were already so low at 43%. So the reason why there was such a massive miss from the polls was because they missed a bunch of Trump support. However, my belief is that Trump has a high floor but a low ceiling. So he's a pluralistic Victorian. He cannot win elections in a majoritarian fashion. He won the primary via a pluralistic victory where the vote splitting happened against him and he was able to win. Like if Bernie was in that scenario that had happened in the Democratic primary, he would be able to win. But he's not able to win these majoritarian elections because his ceiling is very low. So I don't even think he can get 50%. And Trump in 2020 was actually stronger than he was in 2016. His favorables were a lot higher. He was actually a stronger candidate, and he was still only able to get 47.8. And there's not really much evidence, if at all, of like underperformance for Democrats in the Rust Belt states. It's more of an issue of overperformance for Trump, where there's actually just like this 2 to 4% that gets missed. Usually it's 2 to 3, but that gets missed in these poll numbers. Actually, in the Rust Belt, it's higher, that ends up getting missed. And so the reason why these poll numbers are actually good and I actually think better than what you're seeing is because she's at 50% already in the poll, and there's not much evidence of underperformance. And there's no evidence of an overperformance above 49%. So I think that there are different floors and ceilings. I would say his floor nationally is 46, but his ceiling is 48 in the national percentage. I think in the Rust Belt states, his floor in the Rust Belt states is probably 47, but his ceiling is 49 to 49.5. I think his floor in the Sun Belt is like 48.5. His ceiling is like 49.5. So he has these different floors and ceilings, but I don't think he can get across 50% anywhere. It's going to be hard to kind of manage these numbers with the third parties involved. However, in the head-to-head numbers, these are the numbers that we're able to see. So we're kind of modeling with the head-to-head, right? It's going to be a bit different when Jill Stein and all these people are sort of eating some of the votes. But the point here being that these are really good numbers. And so I actually would propose something different. The way we should look to see whether or not Kamala Harris is likely to win the Rust Belt states is whether or not she's crossing 50%. Because if you take a look at a lot of these polls that have come out right now, in a lot of them, like you see 50 to 49 here, so it's like a 1 point more. This is a YouGov poll that we're looking at. But you have the Patriot polling poll, which again is one of the, there's a lot of terrible pollsters that are coming out from late 2022. But for example, a 48-48 poll is really not good because it means that you're not at the majority yet in a head-to-head, which is not good. You need to be at the majority because Trump can overperform 48%. Trafalgar, 47-47, another garbage pollster to be fair. CNN SSRS, this is a plus 5% lead, but this is actually kind of concerning because you're only at 48%. Now, this took Kennedy into account, but still, 48% is not enough. So you would think, man, a plus 5 lead. I personally think a plus 5 lead here is actually worse than this head-to-head 1-point victory. This poll is actually just more likely to represent what's reality. And so this poll is just going to have a massive this is the same. This is like a 2020 poll where it's like, oh yeah, Trump's at 43. No, he's not. He's going to get 47 to 49 in Michigan, right? He's going to get somewhere between there. Maybe like at worst slightly beneath 47. But this poll, a lot of people say, well, oh, the margin shrunk by 4 points. But I actually think that this is not worse. I think this is actually, the one we have now is actually better. Another one, a +3, 47 to 44. Again, this is not, there's only 2% for third parties, Oliver and Stein. And Oliver's not going to have much going to Harris. But 47, 44, again, a +3, you would think that's worse. It's not better, in my opinion. This poll from Emerson is actually really good. It's 51-48. The active vote poll is 50-50, and then all these polls are all in the 40s. Even the head-to-heads, like this Epic MRA, 46-47, Trump +1. Those kinds of polls are bad. So just keep in mind, this poll might not look like a big lead. It looks really tight, but there's not really necessarily much evidence at all, if any at all, of underperformance for Democrats. Also, keep in mind, Kamala Harris is going to have that kind of like 08 Obama effect where a lot of people are actually excited to vote for her, as opposed to the 2020 Biden situation where people were just voting against Donald Trump as opposed to voting for him. Basically, nobody voted for Biden. Same thing with Hillary as well, is kind of a lesser to evil situation. So because of the new voter registrations that we're seeing, the surges with, groups that typically are missed by the polls or typically are not, accounted for, etc., young women, young black women, etc., those kinds of groups. Because of those groups also, there's probably also going to be an overperformance effect. Now, I personally believe that is going to be stronger in the Sun Belt because it plays stronger in terms of proportionality. Like, for example, in the state of Georgia, black people make up like 30+% of the population. That's almost insane. That's like 3 times the national proportion total, right? So there, it's going to be massive. I think Georgia's a lock for Kamala Harris. But it's not going to be as strong in the Rust Belt states where the population is a lot whiter, right? So, but is it enough? Is that sort of shift enough? Is the woman voter shift enough? Are those kinds of things going to be enough? That kind of ends up being the question that you end up having. But these are a really great lead, I would say. I think the marker now is Kamala Harris reaching 50% in the head-to-head? I think that's the case. And then also what we know is in the state of Michigan, in the state of Georgia, Joe Biden actually overperformed by 0.9 points, which ended up winning him the election. Trump, again, predictably overperformed by like 2 to 3 points again. And so Biden ended up winning by 0.2. He would have lost had he not overperformed the polls by 0.9. So even if Kamala's down by like, whatever, a point or whatever in Georgia, she could still win because the fundamentals are just going to be so strong. Same thing in Arizona, he overperformed by 0.7. So we also got to take into account both candidates can overperform, and they both did in 2020 in the Sun Belt states. So that's why I think AZ and GA are actually more likely to go blue. But I think Michigan is still going to go blue. Pennsylvania, I think, is a sheer toss-up at this point. It's going to probably come down to ground game and those kinds of things. Another thing to keep in mind, Pennsylvania historically has had a lot smaller of a polling error than either of the other 2 Rust Belt states have. In 2020, it was only off by 3.5, which sounds like a lot, but Wisconsin was off by 7.7, and Michigan was off by 5.1. So it's actually a lot less, significantly less, right? And so Wisconsin, I think at right now is also, this poll is a really good number here. But Wisconsin somehow is polling higher than both Michigan and Pennsylvania, which is highly unlikely, especially considering the fact that Wisconsin was the least blue out of the 3 in 2020 and slightly in second place, barely ahead of Pennsylvania in terms of blueness in 2016. I think it was just by 0.2% or something like that. So definitely very, very suspect. But these are good numbers for Kamala Harris in the Rust Belt. And so I think her best strategy is going to be, because Georgia appears to be such a strong lock, you have to win one of NC, PA, or GA. NC or one of the PAGA states, right? You have to win one of those 3. But what I think is you're going to win Georgia. I think it's hard to lose Georgia, I think, if you're Kamala Harris. NC is going to be a straight dogfight. Pennsylvania is going to be a lesser of a dogfight, but it's still going to be really hard. It's a toss-up. So once you win one of the 3, I think you shouldn't try to win the other ones as well, although you don't know which ones you're going to win, so that's the problem. But Georgia, and then go Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada, I think. Because I think Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada are far easier to win than Pennsylvania or North Carolina. North Carolina is going to really be tough. Really, really tough. But I think once you win one of those, you want to switch to the easier states and go after those. So I think that's actually the best strategy. So it's really important she does well in Michigan, I would say even more so than Pennsylvania, because you can replace Pennsylvania with Georgia. So I think that what she needs to do is really try to win Michigan, and the numbers I think are actually looking good, so I'm feeling good Our marker should be, are you reaching 50% head-to-head polls? If yes, I think she's going to win, guaranteed, basically. Because Trump has a very low ceiling. He might underperform these numbers, actually. He might underperform these numbers. He's never really gotten these numbers before, even in 2020 when he was strong. So, if you can reach 50%, you should be able to win these elections.